It was one of those October evenings in Ohio when everything feels like it's holding its breath. The sky had been gray since noon, and by 6, the rain had settled into a quiet, steady rhythm against the kitchen window. I stood by the stove, stirring a pot of soup I barely remembered starting, watching the maple leaves spiral down onto the wet sidewalk outside like the days of my life falling one by one. The house smelled of potatoes and thyme, and the faint hum of the dishwasher blended with the ticking of the clock, each second echoing a little louder in the silence of waiting. Max was at the kitchen table, hunched over his math homework, his pencil tapping against the edge every few seconds. He had his father's jawline and storm-gray eyes, but his worry came from me. Every few minutes, he looked toward the front door, then back at his worksheet. Sophie, our 5-year-old, was in the living room, seated cross-legged on the carpet, having a tea party with her dolls. She was all warmth and imagination, singing to them in a made-up tune, her voice a bright thread weaving through the heavy stillness. Mark had said he'd be home by 6. It was now 6:45. I glanced at the clock, then back at the pot. I didn't even bother texting him anymore. After 12 years of marriage, I'd stopped expecting him to be on time. There was always some excuse. An emergency at the shop, a customer who showed up late, a part that took longer to fix than expected. And even if none of those things happened, there were the nights he'd just drive around for a while before coming home. He never said it outright, but I could feel it in the way he walked through the door. This wasn't the place he wanted to be. I used to wait anxiously, watching the driveway from the window, hoping each pair of headlights was his. But over time, that hope had turned into routine, and the routine into something heavier, something that settled on my chest each evening like the rain clouds outside. That night felt no different, and yet, for reasons I couldn't explain, the air tasted more bitter than usual. At exactly 6:53, I heard the familiar clatter of keys and the creak of the front door opening. I froze for a second, spoon halfway to the pot, a strange flicker of relief sparking in my chest. Mark was home. Finally, I waited, expecting to hear his boots on the kitchen tile, the shuffle of him hanging up his jacket, maybe even a kiss on the cheek if he was in a decent mood. But the footsteps didn't come toward me. They moved past the entryway and headed straight toward the back door. He didn't even glance into the kitchen. I stepped into the hallway just in time to see his back disappearing out the door that led to the garage. No, sorry I'm late. Just silence and the heavy thud of the door closing behind him, followed by the faint scent of motor oil and damp leaves drifting in his wake. I stood there for a moment, hand resting on the wall, staring at that door. It wasn't the first time he went straight out there, but usually he at least pretended to care, asked if dinner was ready, gave the kids a quick hug. Tonight, nothing. Just gone. The garage had always been his sanctuary. He called it his workspace, but really it was a fortress. No one went in there unless invited, not even me. It was where he worked on engines, tinkered with old parts, drank beer, and escaped from whatever he didn't want to deal with inside the house. Me. The kids. Us. I turned back toward the kitchen, trying to shake the feeling that something was off. But the unease had already settled deep in my gut, cold and still. 20 minutes passed. The soup simmered. Max finished his homework. Sophie asked when Daddy was coming into play. I told her soon, though I didn't believe it. Then I heard another car pulling into the driveway. I peeked out the window and saw Linda's beat-up silver sedan rolling to a stop. My stomach tightened instinctively. Mark's mother had a way of showing up unannounced, like she owned the place, which, to be fair, I sometimes suspected she believed she did. She never knocked. She never called ahead. And she always came with a purpose. As she made her way down the path, I noticed she wasn't alone. Andrew was with her, Mark's childhood friend. He was quiet, polite, the kind of man who blended into the background at family gatherings. But he and Mark shared a strange closeness, one built on greasy hands and garage banter, not much else. They didn't come into the house. I watched from the window as they headed straight to the garage. Linda striding ahead with her usual sense of entitlement, Andrew trailing behind with his hands in his pockets. I stood there holding a dish towel, watching the door close behind them. 3 people in the garage. My husband, his mother, his best friend. Not a single one of them thought to say hello. And that's when I knew something was very wrong. I waited as long as I could. Maybe 30 minutes, maybe more. I wasn't really watching the clock. The soup had started to thicken, the scent of thyme turning bitter from the simmer. Sophie was curled up on the couch now, her dolls forgotten, thumb tucked in her mouth like she hadn't done since she was 3. Max was back at the table, this time drawing tanks and dragons in the margins of his notebook. Mark still hadn't come inside, so I grabbed a container, ladled some soup into it, and slipped on a jacket. Maybe he was caught up in a conversation. Maybe he just needed a reminder that we were here, his family waiting for him. The cold air hit me as I stepped outside. The yard was slick with wet leaves, and the porch light cast long shadows across the grass. I walked toward the garage, the yellow glow beneath the door spilling out onto the concrete like a warning. The door was slightly ajar. I was about to knock, maybe say something light like, "Dinner's ready, boys," when I heard her voice. "Linda." "Oh, please, Mark," she was saying. "Don't act like you don't know what I'm talking about. I told you from the start that girl wasn't right for you. Look at her now, frumpy, bloated, dragging herself around like a tired old housemaid." I froze. "Mom, come on," Mark's voice replied, low and resigned. But it wasn't defensive. It wasn't angry. It wasn't what I needed to hear. Linda snorted. "You know I'm right." She used to be halfway presentable, but now she waddles around in sweats and stained t-shirts like she's given up. Honestly, I'd be embarrassed to be seen in public with her. My chest tightened. I stepped back slightly, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear. "I mean," she continued, her voice cutting like broken glass, "what does she even do all day? The house is a mess, the kids are a mess. She can't even be bothered to lose the baby weight, and Sophie's what, 5 now?" I expected Mark to defend me, to say something, anything. Instead, he sighed. "I don't know, Mom. Maybe you're right. Sometimes I think I made a mistake marrying her." It hit me like a punch to the gut. I actually stumbled backward, hand gripping the cold frame of the door. A mistake. I was a mistake. Andrew cleared his throat inside. "Hey, that's kind of harsh, man. She's the mother of your kids." Mark didn't answer right away. Then, with a sharp laugh, he said, "Yeah, and Max spends all day glued to a screen while she just shrugs like it's normal. Sophie's always throwing tantrums at daycare. You think that's parenting? She's not even trying. She just sits around, watches TV, complains she's tired. God knows what of." Linda jumped back in. "Exactly. And remember Lena from the accounting office? Now there's a woman. Smart, polished, takes care of herself. If you had ended up with someone like that..." Mark cut her off, but not with denial. "She's married, Mom." "So? A real man could change that. You think Lena would sit around looking like a cow all day?" And that was it. That word. Cow. The word shattered something inside me. 12 years of marriage. 2 kids. Countless dinners cooked, shirts folded. Nights spent rocking sick babies while he snored in the next room. I had traded sleep and youth and dreams for this life, for this family. And now I was a cow. I pressed a hand to my chest, trying to quiet the storm rising inside me. My vision blurred. My breath came in short, shallow gasps. I backed away slowly, careful not to step on the crackling leaves beneath my boots. I couldn't let them know I'd heard. Not yet. Not until I could figure out what to do with the pieces of myself they had just crushed. I barely remember walking back to the house. The rain had slowed to a mist, clinging to my hair and lashes like sweat after a bad dream. My fingers were numb from gripping the soup container, but I didn't feel it. I didn't feel much of anything except the weight in my chest, a crushing, silent ache that pulsed with every breath. My mind was still spinning with echoes of that word, cow. Inside, the warmth of the kitchen hit me like a lie. The yellow light, the smell of herbs, the quiet chatter of the TV in the background, it all felt too normal, too kind for what I had just heard. I blinked a few times, willing the tears to stay hidden. Max looked up from his notebook. "Mom, is Dad coming in soon?" I opened my mouth, closed it again. My voice wasn't ready. Then I forced a smile, one of those tight, brittle ones that don't reach the eyes. "He's working on something in the garage, sweetheart. Said he'll be a while." Max nodded, half believing me, and went back to shading in the wheels of a truck he was drawing. He didn't ask again. I busied myself setting the table, my movements mechanical. Plates, forks, napkins, ketchup for Max, a pink cup with a bendy straw for Sophie. She came bounding in from the living room, clutching one of her dolls. "Is Daddy coming to play after dinner?" I knelt down, brushing her hair back from her forehead, and kissed the crown of her head. "Not tonight, baby. He's busy." She pouted for a second, then scampered over to her seat. We sat down, the three of us, like we always did. I ladled soup into their bowls, cut Sophie's bread into triangles, reminded Max to chew with his mouth closed. On the surface, everything was fine. It had to be, but inside I was crumbling. They talked about school, about a boy in Max's class who got in trouble for hiding the teacher's stapler, about how Sophie wanted a unicorn cake for her birthday, even though it was 6 months away. I nodded, responded, laughed at the right moments. I even asked questions, just to keep them talking, to drown out the ringing in my ears. But behind every smile, my mind was screaming. 12 years. That's what it came down to. 12 years of being wife, mother, housekeeper, nurse, teacher, and they were in the garage laughing about how embarrassing I was. How disposable. I stared down at my spoon, watching the broth ripple. I couldn't taste it, couldn't feel the heat on my tongue. All I could feel was shame, sharp and acidic, curling in my stomach like a fist. I looked at my children, at Max's serious brow, furrowed over his drawing, at Sophie humming as she dipped bread into her soup, and I knew I couldn't let them see. Whatever happened between Mark and me, whatever storm was about to tear through our house, they couldn't be part of it. So I smiled again, tucked a strand of hair behind Sophie's ear, asked Max about his spelling test, and prayed they wouldn't notice how quiet I had become. That night, I lay beside him in the dark, both of us buried beneath the same blanket, but worlds apart. The sheets were cool against my skin, the room silent except for the low hum of the ceiling fan and the rhythm of Mark's breathing. Slow, steady, untouched. He had fallen asleep minutes after his head hit the pillow, just like he always did, like there wasn't a damn thing wrong in the world. I stared at the ceiling, my hands clenched beneath the blanket, my heart aching in places I didn't even know could hurt. Once upon a time, I used to love watching him sleep. In the beginning, I'd stay awake just a little longer to trace the lines of his face, study the way his lashes curled, how his lips twitched slightly with dreams. I used to feel safe in that bed. I used to feel chosen. Now, I felt like a ghost haunting the outline of a life I no longer belonged to. I turned my head slowly to look at him. The profile I once kissed with such tenderness now felt unfamiliar. His jaw, once strong and comforting, now rigid with distance. His hands, which used to reach for me in the night, lay folded across his chest like they'd forgotten what I felt like. Had they ever really known? I thought about the promises we'd made. I do. In sickness and in health. For better or worse. We said those words with shining eyes, hands held tight, hearts full of hope. I remembered the way he used to look at me, like I was something rare, something beautiful. Back then, I believed I could be both wife and mother and still be seen, still matter. But over time, those looks faded, one by one, like photographs left in the sun. And now, I could see all the signs I'd ignored. The way he always turned slightly away when I tried to hug him from behind. How he dodged photos, especially if I was in them. How he suddenly had to work late any time there was a family event. I thought he was just tired. I thought life had worn him down, the way it wears all of us down. But maybe it wasn't life. Maybe it was me. Maybe I had become something he wanted to escape. I rolled onto my side, away from him, the mattress shifting beneath my weight. His breathing didn't change. Not a stir, not a word. Just sleep. Restful, detached sleep. I closed my eyes, but all I could hear were their voices in the garage. Her body, her clothes, her cooking. That word. Cow. I bit my lip, hard to keep from crying. I couldn't fall apart. Not yet. Tomorrow I would still have to make breakfast, pack lunchboxes, find Sophie's missing sock, remind Max to brush his teeth. Life would march on with its demands and routines, as if tonight hadn't broken something I might never be able to fix. Lying there beside him, I realized something that made my stomach twist. I wasn't his partner anymore. I was a fixture, a habit, a shadow moving through the house, filling the space but no longer seen. I was the outline of a woman who used to be loved. The next morning started like any other. Sophie begged for extra syrup on her waffles. Max complained about his socks feeling weird. Mark had already left for work, or at least that's what I told myself, since he hadn't said a word to me after dinner, just slipped out sometime before dawn, like a thief in a marriage that wasn't his anymore. I was loading the dishwasher when I saw her car pull into the driveway. Linda, of course. She never knocked. She never called. She just showed up, always with something in hand, pie, cookies, a casserole, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. This time it was a box of sweet rolls from that little bakery downtown, the one she always made sure to mention was too pricey for everyday people. "Monica, honey," she chirped as she breezed through the front door like she owned the place. I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop these off for the kids. I forced a polite smile. "That's nice of you. They're already at school, though." "Oh, well, all the more for us," she said, slipping off her gloves and scanning the kitchen like she was taking inventory. She always did that, looked around like a guest judging a hotel room, not a mother-in-law visiting her son's home. I could see her eyes land on the smudged glass above the stove, the dying plant by the window, the laundry basket I hadn't moved yet. "You look tired, dear," she added, settling into one of the kitchen chairs. "Didn't sleep well." I poured myself some coffee, something like that. She folded her hands on the table, the picture of concern. I've been thinking lately. Have you considered doing something for yourself? Like a little spa day or maybe a new haircut? I didn't answer. She pressed on. "You've always had such a pretty face, but lately, well, I worry you've let yourself go a bit. And men, well, they notice these things. Mark especially." There it was. I took a sip of coffee and let the burn wake me up. "I mean," she continued, "it's not just about looks, of course, but a woman should always try to keep things appealing, especially when she's married, especially when she's a stay-at-home mom. It's so easy to get comfortable, isn't it?" I looked at her for a long moment, studying the way her lips curled when she thought she was being subtle, the way her eyes lit up with a kind of cold satisfaction, like she was dancing around the real message, but knew I understood it anyway. And for the first time, I didn't nod. I didn't apologize. I didn't offer excuses or explanations. I just said, "Did Mark say something to you?" Linda blinked. "What? No, of course not. He's too polite to bring up delicate things. But I'm his mother, Monica. I know when something's off." I leaned forward, slightly, my voice even. "You said I've let myself go, that I don't take care of myself, that I don't keep my husband happy. Those are awfully specific concerns for a mother just dropping off cinnamon rolls." She stiffened, her fingers tightening on the edge of the box. "I'm just trying to help, dear. A little honest feedback never hurt anyone." "No," I said quietly, "but dishonesty does." There was a beat of silence, just the clock ticking above the fridge and the sound of rain beginning again outside. "I don't know what you think you overheard," she started, but I cut her off. "You don't have to pretend. I heard everything. Last night, in the garage. Her face froze, and in that moment, all her fake concern, all the sugary smiles, all the passive-aggressive digs collapsed under the weight of truth. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood there, still, steady, and said, "Now I know exactly what you think of me, and I know he agrees with you." She opened her mouth, but no words came. So I turned and walked to the sink, placing my coffee cup gently beside the dishes. I didn't need to hear another word from her. What I needed was to decide what came next. I didn't cry when Linda left. Not even when the door clicked shut behind her and the scent of cinnamon rolls lingered in the kitchen like some cruel joke. But later that afternoon, after I'd cleaned the countertops twice and folded the same load of laundry 3 times just to keep my hands busy, I found myself sitting on the edge of the bed with my phone in my lap. I stared at Olivia's name on the screen. We hadn't spoken in months. Not because anything had happened, we just drifted. She lived 2 towns over now, had a busy job, a boyfriend, a life that seemed far from mine. But she was the kind of person who never let you feel forgotten when you reached out. I hit call before I could overthink it. She picked up on the second ring. "Monica? Oh my God, hey. It's been forever." Her voice was like sunlight through a cracked window. "Yeah," I said, and already my throat was tightening. I'm sorry for calling out of nowhere." "Don't be silly," she said instantly. "I've missed you. Are you okay?" I tried to speak, but the silence on my end stretched a little too long. She softened her voice. "Monica, what's going on?" And just like that, the words came rushing out. I told her about the garage, about Linda, about Mark's voice saying things I couldn't unhear. I kept talking until I was out of breath and out of tears, and she didn't interrupt once. When I finally paused, she said, "Oh, honey, none of that is your fault." I wanted to believe her. I wanted so badly to believe that I wasn't some worn-out version of a woman who'd used up her value. "You're not invisible," she said, like she could read my thoughts. "You are not disposable. You are not some houseplant they can ignore and blame for not blooming." I laughed unexpectedly. "That's a hell of a metaphor." "Yeah, well, I've had practice," she replied gently. "People treat you like background when you stop demanding to be the main character in your own life." That landed hard, because it was true. I'd stopped asking for anything. Attention, respect, affection. I thought being a good wife meant shrinking so my husband could stretch. I thought keeping the peace meant keeping quiet. And I thought endurance was love. But Olivia's voice, so firm, so unwavering, reminded me that I used to be someone before I became just a mom or Mark's wife. "Thank you," I whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me. For still seeing me." She didn't answer right away, but I could hear her breathing. "Present. There. You call me any time," she said. "I don't care if it's 2 a.m. You're not going through this alone." And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, I found Mark in the living room, sitting on the edge of the couch with his laptop open but barely touched. The TV was on, some news channel murmuring about markets and politics, white noise meant to fill the silence. I stood in the doorway for a moment, gathering the courage that had been building all day. My hands were cold, even though the heater was running. "We need to talk," I said quietly. He didn't look up. "Can it wait? I've got some work to finish." I stepped closer. "No, it really can't." His jaw tightened. He closed the laptop a little harder than necessary and leaned back against the couch like he was preparing for a performance he didn't want to give. "What now?" he said, already on the defensive. I sat down across from him, arms folded, legs shaking. "I heard everything last night. In the garage. Your mother, Andrew." His eyes flicked to mine, then away. "You were eavesdropping." "Don't you dare make this about that," I snapped, my voice sharper than I'd planned. "You said I was a mistake, that you were ashamed of me, that marrying me was settling." Mark looked at me then, really looked, and for a second I saw something behind his eyes. Shame, maybe. Regret. But it vanished as quickly as it came. I was venting, he said. It wasn't meant for you to hear. But you meant it. He stood up, ran a hand through his hair. God, Monica, this is exactly what I mean. You're always turning everything into drama. I work all day, I come home, and I can't even breathe without being accused of something. I'm not accusing you of anything, I said, standing now too. I'm telling you that I know exactly where I stand in this house, and it's nowhere near beside you. He laughed, bitter and low. What do you want from me? You sit around this house all day. You haven't had a job in years. You barely take care of yourself. Do you even look in the mirror anymore? That cut deeper than he could imagine. I staggered a little, but held my ground. And yet, I'm the one who holds this family together, I said. I'm the one who knows when the kids need new shoes, who remembers their teachers' names, who makes sure there's dinner and clean clothes and stability. You think that's nothing because you never had to do it. He was about to answer when we both heard the sharp click of heels on the floor behind us. Linda, of course. She walked in like she owned the house, her arms folded tight, eyes scanning the room like a hawk. Is this really necessary? She said, directing it at me. Arguing in front of the children? You've always been so dramatic. We weren't arguing in front of them, I said. They're asleep. She rolled her eyes. Still, it's not attractive, Monica. Honestly, I don't know what Mark ever saw in you. I turned to Mark. Are you going to say anything? Are you just going to let her talk to me like that, again? He said nothing, just looked down. That was my answer. So I drew a breath, so deep it hurt. And I said the thing I hadn't dared to say in years. I'm leaving. Linda scoffed. Don't be ridiculous. I'm not asking for your opinion, I said, and my voice was calmer than I expected. I've spent too long shrinking myself to fit in this house, in this marriage, into this version of me you could tolerate. I'm done. Mark stared at me, stunned into silence. I didn't wait for him to speak. I turned, walked up the stairs, and started packing, finally choosing myself over all of them. It was still dark when I loaded the kids into the car. Max rubbed his eyes and asked if we were going somewhere fun. I smiled and said somewhere peaceful. Sophie clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit, her hair still tousled from sleep. The drive felt endless and silent. Rain streaked the windshield in slow, steady lines. I kept my hands tight on the wheel, more out of instinct than control, because inside everything was trembling. We pulled into my parents' driveway just after sunrise. Their little house in the suburbs looked the same, worn but warm, like a childhood blanket that still smelled faintly of lavender and laundry detergent. As soon as the engine stopped, the front door opened. My dad stepped out onto the porch with his coffee mug, and my mom followed in her robe, one hand pressed to her chest as if bracing herself for what she already knew. They didn't ask why. They didn't need to. My mother came down the steps and wrapped her arms around me so tight I nearly collapsed into her. You're home, she whispered. That's all that matters. Inside, everything felt smaller than I remembered, and yet somehow safer. The kitchen still had the same pale green curtains I had hated as a teenager. The smell of cinnamon rolls my mom had started baking filled the air, warm and unspoken in its comfort. After settling the kids in the guest room with cartoons and cereal, I sat at the dining table with my dad. He didn't offer cliches or try to play therapist. He just looked at me with that quiet steadiness I had always admired. You don't have to tell us everything now, he said. But if you're going to leave someone, make sure it's because you've remembered your worth, not because they forgot it. I blinked back tears. I think I forgot it too. He nodded slowly. Then maybe this is the place to remember. We sat there a long time, not talking, just being. The kind of silence that doesn't demand anything from you, that wraps around you like a blanket when you're too raw to speak. That night, I tucked the kids into their beds, kissed their cheeks, and sat by the window in the old room that used to be mine. The streetlight outside flickered like it always had. A tree branch scratched lightly against the glass. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I slept through the night. No nightmares. No hollow weight pressing down on my chest. Just sleep, deep, dreamless, and whole. It was a Sunday morning when he showed up. I saw his car from the kitchen window, same black sedan, same dent on the side mirror I had begged him to fix for years. He stepped out, looking as if he hadn't slept in days. His hair was a mess, his coat wrinkled, and for the first time he looked unsure. I stepped out onto the porch before he could knock. I didn't want the kids to hear his voice. Not yet. Not when things had just started to feel calm again. "Monica!" he said softly, like saying my name was a fragile thing. I didn't respond. He looked down at his shoes, then back up at me. "I made mistakes," he said. "I was stupid. I listened to my mother. I didn't," he paused. "I didn't treat you the way you deserved. But we have a family and I want to fix this. I want you to come home." I waited, letting his words hang there. Then I asked, "What part of that house feels like home to me now?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I wasn't angry anymore. Not even hurt. Just done. "You didn't break me," I said quietly. "But you showed me how far I had let myself disappear. I won't go back to that." He stepped closer. "Monica, I can change." I shook my head, not out of bitterness, but with a calm that surprised even me. "That's something you'll have to figure out on your own. I'm not your test subject." For a moment, I thought he might shout or plead or storm off. But he just stood there, shoulders slumped, eyes lost. And I felt tall. Not in the way you do when you're proud or vindicated, but steady, grounded, like the earth had shifted and I had finally found my footing. "I have to go," I said. "Max and Sophie are waiting for pancakes." He nodded. "Can I at least see them?" "Maybe, but not today." I turned and walked back inside. That was it. No fireworks. No grand speeches. Just a quiet door closing. That afternoon, I took the kids to the park. Sophie ran ahead with her pink scarf trailing in the wind. Max climbed the jungle gym, his laughter high and free. I sat on the bench, the sun warm on my face, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself breathe without bracing for pain. I didn't know exactly what came next. I had no grand plan, no perfect roadmap. But I knew this. I would never again shrink myself to fit someone else's comfort. This was my life now, and I was ready to start living it, for me, for my children, and for the woman I had nearly forgotten I was.